Welcome. If you've just joined us, this is Africa News Network. My name is Cindy Mabi and this is ANN7 Prime. Our top story this evening, the DA has taken the first steps in taking disciplinary action against Helen Zille for her pro-colonialism utterances. The Federal Executive Council has formally laid charges against the Western Cape Premier for bringing the party into disrepute and damaging its reputation. While Zille has doggedly refused to concede that her defense of an oppressive colonial regime was wrong, there are growing calls for action against her. In many ways, Zille's disciplinary will be a watershed moment for the Democratic Alliance. The question is, can the DA now afford to let her off easily? If the DA ditches, it could or would endorse the perception that Helen Zille is untouchable, but decisive action by the DA leader will dispel the notion of him being a proxy leader. If Helen Zille does not get the boot, that would mean the DA is endorsing the legacy of colonialism being positive. And on the contrary, a decisive action would lead to the DA drawing more support from the black and colored communities. And despite her defiance, if there aren't consequences for Helen Zille, it would undermine Maimane's authority over defiant and unapologetic Zille. On the other hand, sacking her could lead to backlash from the white constituency that strongly supports and backs Zille, while decisive action may add to the DA's black and colored constituency and membership nationally as being split or even dwindling. It may also split the party into two racial groupings. And joining us on the line is Yonela Diko, ANC Western Cape spokesperson. Yonela, thanks so much for your time. Good evening. Now, do you think the DA is ready to do away with Helen Zille?
First of all, I think we must say that the decision by their legal counsel to take Helen Zille to the DC, or at least to charge her, is a step in the right direction. However, it creates two problems. One, it's not taking us any step forward in a sense that that's the same thing the federal executive announced. But the second thing is that it shows a certain split, because you can't have the highest decision-making body saying Helen Zille must go for DC, and then later on the substructure saying that they are charging her. It should have been the other way around, because when the highest decision-making body has made a decision, you can't have a substructure then making another decision. What if the decision was different from a substructure? So it shows that there is a split in the DA where Maimane and Self seem to have gone forward ahead to say she must go to DC, and then later on the substructure, the legal one, which was supposed to actually make the decision first, comes later to say she must be charged. It just shows that there is a split there going on, where particular groups wanted to actually be taken to this DC and be charged, the other groups resisting. So that reflection of a split shows that the DA is struggling to make up their mind about what to do with Helen Zille.
So what you're saying, Mr. Diko, is that essentially the DA is finding itself stuck between a rock and a hard place over the Zille matter, but some action needs to be taken nonetheless.
At this stage, they can't. Firstly, because Helen Zille, in her anxiety to prove that she was either better than Tony Leon or better than the other leaders that came before, the Van Zyl Slabet, she almost created a one-person show of the organization. So she's the rainmaker who's doing all the fundraising. She's the one who's organizing all the big meetings. You can't imagine that it is Maimane who actually set up the meeting with Netanyahu from Israel. It had to be Helen Zille. She was in Singapore, where she actually made these colonial praises. So she remains the main rainmaker. She remains almost the core of the party. So to get rid of her is going to be extremely difficult. It's going to affect their ability to fundraise. It's going to affect their ability to keep a network intact. You will remember that even when Mampele came in, there was a decision taken between Helen Zille and some funders that they must bring in her. So she remains almost the center of the party. So it's going to be very difficult for them to. So they are indeed caught up between a rock and a hard place.
And as you say that she's the Trojan horse and, very central to the DA's structure, but will any further action or further delay to take action against her comment hurt the DA?
With each day that they are not making up their mind what to do with Helen Zille, it's hurting them. Firstly, because some of the reasons why they've put Maimane as the head of the party, they've put Bongikosi Madikizela as the head in the province, they've put Van Damme as the spokesperson, Ntuli as the face in Durban, is to create an image of a changing party, becoming more pro-black, more non-racial. Then you have the person who's actually the heart of the party coming out to undermine black people, to say that there are certain things we wouldn't otherwise have as the country if it were not for this white cabal or the white males. So what it does is to create this tension between what the party wants to be and what it remains is because of Helen Zille. So with each day that she remains in the party, being sort of now the standard bearer of colonial praise, standard bearer of whiteness in the party, it works against what the party wants to be moving into the future. So effectively, with her being kept with each day, it eats away at the honesty that they are trying to create, at the change that they are trying to be, because really it makes people say, yeah, we see you want to be non-racial, yeah, we see you want to be the model for the future of what the party should be, but as long as you remain with this particular individual who represents the core of the whiteness, who represents anti-black, no one is going to believe you.
And I mean, the DA hasn't been spared any criticism around racism and the complexion of its executive being largely white. And if the DA does not act against the actions of Helen Zille, there'll be consequences. But do you think her exit from the DA would further split the party along racial lines?
It certainly will. So it's going to take very extreme tact from the current leadership to make sure that her exit is smooth. But it's going to be a struggle because what is likely to happen now, after Zille, there is unlikely to ever be another white leader that runs the DA. So that's the challenge now that the DA has, that if they lose just that core of whiteness, as you heard Zille, she's saying that the DA now is starting to become like the ANC, which means it's actually moving from this core of being white liberals into something that she can't recognize. She can't be the only one who thinks like that. There certainly is a core that's feeling that the party is slipping out of their fingers. So if there is a core that thinks like that, what it means is that when they finally get rid of Helen Zille, she will certainly move away with that core that things. And they may not be big numbers, but you can bet they are big pockets, big funders, and because that is important in how the party functions, that's certainly going to hurt the party, and that split may well be the end of the DA.
Mr. Diko, thanks indeed for your time. That is Yonela Diko, ANC Western Cape spokesperson, on his reaction to the DA laying charges and disciplinary action against Helen Zille. Joining us now is Dr. Philip Dexter, political analyst. Thank you so much, Dr. Dexter, for your time. Just establishing from our previous guest that the DA really finds itself in crossroads as to what to do, but nonetheless some action needs to be taken and not just a smokescreen. But do you think they will ultimately oust Helen Zille?
It's not clear to me that the DA will dismiss Helen Zille or retire her just because of her comments to do with colonialism. As we've seen in the past, when any member of the DA has been found guilty of racism or of anything else of that nature, they simply get a slap on the wrist. So I have no doubt they'll do the same to Helen Zille.
But Dr. Dexter, in the same breath, of course, the perpetuation of the perception that the DA is racist or softer on racist can also affect the party. And can the DA afford to let Zille go off the hook lightly?
I think it's true. The DA faces a very difficult issue here because on the one hand, they're trying to appeal to black voters, and on the other, they're trying to appease the white right wing within their party. And so, you know, if they chop Helen Zille, I think they'll lose a massive amount of support. It'll cause lots of division in the party. At the same time, if they keep her, I think that the response from the voters is going to be quite significant.
And while we appreciate the processes, internal processes of any party or organization, there are calls as well that the timelines are not well defined and that it seems to be more of a smokescreen. In your view, do you think any further delay to act against Helen Zille will affect the DA negatively?
I think the DA at the moment are sitting quite pretty if one looks at the political situation in our country. The problems that the ANC are facing have actually allowed Helen Zille to get away with this, and this controversy that she created seems to be second or third in line, if you like, in terms of controversial issues. So I would imagine that the DA will probably see if they can ride it out in the hope that the problems that the ANC is facing will overshadow theirs.
Yeah, and we've seen the campaign and the crusade to try and diversify the party more, and Helen Zille being instrumental in that, in attracting more diverse supporters. But do you think her exit from the DA could split the party based on the traditional voter core and the new recruits, as it were?
I'm not sure that the DA would split per se, but I think a large section of their support base would lose confidence in the party. I think South Africans are quite polarized at the moment, so many of them would probably find a way of dealing with that. But the bigger question is, will the DA be able to continue to grow if it doesn't address the concerns of South African voters? And, for black people, issues like colonialism, like slavery and apartheid are still very, very deep wounds. One of the things that strikes me about Helen Zille's statement is simply that it just goes to show they don't really understand the pain and the hurt that was caused by these historical experiences. And they think by saying, oh, well, time has passed and we must all forget about the past now, that this will, in fact, actually bring people to do that. I don't think that's the case. I think most black South Africans and most black people and colonized people around the world still bear a huge grievance in terms of the effects of colonialism, and we can see that the countries continue to suffer.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much. That's Dr. Philip Dexter, political analyst, reacting to the DA taking disciplinary action against Helen Zille. On the line, we're joined by Mandla Simelane, political analyst. We hope to be joined by Refilwe Ntsheche, the DA national spokesperson. And good evening to you, Mr. Simelane, and thanks so much for your time. What do you make out of the DA finally instituting disciplinary action, and what are your thoughts in terms of what may come out of it? Are they ready to let go of Helen Zille?
No, before we can, good evening, and welcome, and thanks for giving me this opportunity. And before we can even go to addressing the question that is posed for today, we need to give a historical context of how colonialism and other forms of dispossession and oppression of blacks have impacted and deprived black people. Firstly, you'll understand that Africa before colonialism had its own institutions and had its own form of government. And when it came into contact with Europe in the late 15th century, that's where processes such as slavery started. Before even colonialism could come into place, slavery as a process of form of violence and deprivation and pain that was caused to black people came in place. And later on, we learned that during slavery, people like Queen Elizabeth I, in fact, endorsed slavery by leaving a man who was stealing blacks and selling them as slaves to Europe, and he ignited that person to become a knight. And secondly, in Congo, in the 1880s, the man called King Leopold II, who was a king of Belgium, committed mass murder and chopping of hands and mutilation of black people, masquerading himself as a missionary as he was oppressing black people and killing 10 million Congolese people in the Congo River Basin. So the articulation is really by Zille, and by extension by some of the members of the DA who have been in many instances like being quoted in the media with racist statements. It says to us that the DA is struggling really deeply to get rid of its racist articulations and in establishment.
Yeah, and very lastly, Mr. Simelane, in the inaction that the DA may or may not take, we know that there are certain prescriptions that she may be fined 50,000 rand or serve community service, etc. What impact will this have on the largely black supporters within the DA? While she obviously would have to be cognizant of the white liberal or the traditional voter base of the DA.
It's going to be extremely difficult for them, really. It's going to be extremely difficult because also to then attract the black voters, they need to be seen to be impartial. They need to be seen to be not tolerating racism. They need to take a strict action against this behavior. It's intolerable. It shows, again, the lack of appreciation and understanding of black pain. And no one can ever define black pain except black people themselves. Direct and an experiential pain.
Yeah, Mr. Simelane, your line is breaking up terribly. We're going to have to leave it there. Thanks indeed for your time. That's Mandla Simelane, political analyst, with his views on the DA taking disciplinary action against Helen Zille.